Hello there, students. Welcome back to part 2 of graphing quadratics and their properties. So you're on the second paper. Notes here, and there's quite a bit of information here on this page that it might not look like much, but we need to talk through this stuff here and make sure we get everything that's going on here. So right here we saw this on the front that these are called quadratic functions or quadratic graphs, that it makes a parabola, and this is the form of the equation. These are the form of the equations right here. Now this should look familiar to you because this is what we factored in chapter 8, equations like this where A was some number, B is some number, and C is some number. And it's also important that you begin to recognize that A, B, and C are the variables that we use to identify the numbers in quadratic equations, okay, because there's going to be some things come later that you'll really need to remember that A is the one on the x squared, B is the one on the x, and C is the constant number by itself. Okay, well, what we're going to do now, what they did on this paper for you is just show you how you would graph it. What you're going to have to do first for me is to create this chart like this. Now this is just a completely done example where you will actually have to create everything, and I'll show you how to do that in the next few minutes. So let's say that we have this equation right here. Y equals 1/2 x squared minus 4. All right, think of this as this. You know how it was like a x squared? That's kind of like this. This is kind of like the a. And then notice there's nothing here with b, x. So think of it as this. Think of it as y equals 1/2 x squared plus, since there's no b, it's kind of like b is really 0. 0x minus 4. So b just isn't there, but c is. This negative 4 is the c value. Okay, here's a, here's b, here's c. They just, since it's 0x for b, they're just not going to write it on there. Now, the good news is these are a lot easier to graph than if we had b in there. Those are a little more complicated. So what they've done now, they have picked values for x. So you have to pick 5 values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is an expectation. When you're graphing these by hand, I need 5 points. Okay? Now, notice this point right here. The third point, I like how it's organized. The third point is 0, 4. And let's look at where that is. That's right here. That is the vertex. Okay, so the vertex is listed as the third point, and I really like that because, let me show you something. These 2 points here, so here's the x value, here's the x value for this one. So what they did is they put x into this equation. If x is negative 4, here's the work. Now look what happens here. Negative 4 squared, that means negative 4 times negative 4, it's 16. 16 times 1/2, 8 minus 4 is 4. Gives us this point. Okay, so where x is negative 4, y is 4. So that point, negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, is right here. Okay, so they did the same thing with negative 2. They put negative 2 in there. Negative 2 squared is positive 2 times 1/2 is 1. 1 minus 4. I'm sorry, negative 2 squared is 4. Times 1/2 is 2. 2 minus 4 is negative 2. Gives us this point right here. Okay, negative 2, negative 2. So they found those 2 points. All right, now I'm going to change colors here, and then they did the same thing with 2 and 4. And a couple really interesting things happened. The output were these 2 points. 2, negative 2, which is here, 2, negative 2, and 4, 4. You'll notice that the 2 red points, the 2 underneath, these are on the right side of the axis of symmetry. All right, let's draw the axis of symmetry in there. And then the two points above the vertex here are to the left of the axis of symmetry here. Okay, so what they've done is they've selected 5 points, one of which is the vertex, 2 to the left of the vertex. I'm trying to show my fingers here. Where's my camera? There it is. 2 to the left and 2 points to the right of the vertex. Now here's another cool thing that happens. If you'll notice this now, it'll make our life a lot easier. If I did point number 1, and I realize that this value here, this -4, is this many spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces from the axis of symmetry, the point opposite that will also be exactly that many spaces. So when you use that, when you understand the axis of symmetry and you find 1 point, you've really found 2 points. If you just figure out what is the x value on the other side of that vertex. For this chapter, it's going to be pretty easy because I think most of the vertices that vertices that we deal with will be on the x-axis, making it really easy. It happens right here as well. Look right there. See how that's 2 spaces that way, this one, and this point here is 2 spaces this way. We'll see in the next part just how that will help us. In fact, let's go down to the well, actually, before we go on, I want to explain graphing expectations here. Graphing expectations. When you graph by hand, which you're going to have to do for me, for quadratics, you have to show that you know how to create a quadratic graph easily and correctly without using the technology. Okay, then we'll go to the technology, but you've got to understand it first. The first thing that you have to show me is the vertex. You always begin by finding the vertex. Now again, I like to create the chart like they did there, where you put the vertex as the 3rd point. So you do that first, and then you select 2 values to the left of vertex, and then you select 2 values and you plot them, and then you select 2 values to the right of the vertex. Now when you've done that, you've selected 5 points to create the graph. Okay, you've got to have 5 points to create a quadratic graph because you've got to have the vertex, and then you need to see how that graph curves, because you're going to plot those points and then you're going to have to hand sketch that as good as you can. And then when I'm comfortable that you know how to do that without the technology, then we can go to the technology and do some higher level thinking stuff, but we have to start here. All right, I'm at 8 minutes, and I know that's a lot on that page, so we need to spend the next video actually graphing. So I've got 3 more. We're gonna graph these together here, and hopefully we can get that done in one video following this one. So we'll stop this one and be right back.